Banished by the galaxy, humanity forged an empire from the ashes. They thought exile would break us. The Council cast Earth into silence, stripped us of allies, and left us to die among the stars. But from the ashes of betrayal, humanity rose, not as a forgotten world, but as an empire the galaxy could never ignore. The verdict of stars, the galactic tribunal stretched upward like a mountain made of crystallized starlight, its walls pulsing with the collective consciousness of 1,000 civilizations. Ambassador Marcus Cole stood at the center of the judgment circle, his weathered face calm despite the weight pressing down on his shoulders. Around him, beings from across the known galaxy watched through forms that defied human understanding. Some were clouds of sentient gas, others geometric patterns of living light, and still others existed as harmonious sounds that somehow possessed physical presence. The prime adjudicator, a being known as Velthara, whose body seemed woven from threads of pure thought, raised what might have been an appendage. The gesture brought immediate silence to the vast chamber. Marcus felt the translation implants behind his ears warm, as they prepared to convert the coming verdict into something his human brain could comprehend. The species designated as humanity, originating from the third planet of System Sol 3847, stands accused of aggressive expansion, refusal to submit to proper galactic hierarchy, and the dangerous proliferation of chaotic technologies. Velthara's voice resonated not through air but directly into the minds of all present. After 3 solar cycles of observation and evaluation, this tribunal has reached its verdict. Marcus straightened his shoulders. He had known this moment would come from the day humanity first made contact with the Galactic Council. They had never understood what made humans different, what made them refuse to kneel when every other young species had gladly accepted their assigned place in the cosmic order. Ambassador Cole, another voice interrupted, this one belonging to Zixmar of the crystalline hegemony, a being whose body reflected infinite possibilities in its faceted surface. Your species was given the opportunity to integrate peacefully. You were offered technology, extended lifespans, and a place among the servant races. Why did Earth refuse? Marcus stepped forward, his boots clicking against the floor that wasn't quite solid, wasn't quite energy. Because we believe that freedom is not something to be granted by those who consider themselves superior. It is the birthright of every sentient being. A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the assembled beings. The Corvani delegation, appearing as shifting shadows with too many eyes, projected their thoughts into the collective. Such primitive thinking. The galaxy has functioned in perfect order for 6 million years. Young species serve, mature species guide, ancient species rule. This is the way. It is a way, Marcus countered, his voice carrying the strength of 8 billion humans who had refused to bow. But not the only way. Humanity offers partnership, not servitude. Innovation through diversity, not stagnation through hierarchy. Velthara's form flickered with what the translation implants interpreted as annoyance. Your species has existed for a mere blink of cosmic time. You presume to lecture beings who witnessed the birth of stars? We presume nothing, Marcus replied. We simply refuse to accept that age automatically grants wisdom, or that power justifies oppression. On Earth we have a saying, the tree that does not bend will break. But we also say, better to die standing than live on your knees. The chamber fell silent. Marcus could feel the collective consciousness of the tribunal examining not just his words, but the entire history of humanity. Their wars, their peace, their art, their dreams. He knew they were seeing the same thing that had concerned them from the beginning. Humans didn't just adapt to the universe. They forced the universe to adapt to them. The verdict, Velthara announced, and Marcus felt the weight of finality in those words. Humanity is found guilty of systemic incompatibility with galactic civilization. Your species represents a chaotic element that threatens 6 million years of established order. Marcus's hands clenched at his sides, but he remained silent. Therefore, the prime adjudicator continued, Earth and all human colonies will be sealed within a quantum barrier around your star system. No human vessel, signal, or presence will be permitted beyond the boundary of your Oort cloud. Any attempt to breach this containment will result in the immediate sterilization of your species. The verdict hit Marcus like a physical blow, but he had prepared for this possibility. Hidden in his neural implants were plans, contingencies that Earth's brightest minds had developed in secret. If the galaxy wanted to cage humanity, they would learn what humans did when cornered. You have 72 of your hours to evacuate all human presence from beyond your system, Velthera declared. The barrier will be established immediately thereafter, and will remain for 1,000 of your years. Perhaps isolation will teach your species humility. As the assembly began to disperse, the Corvani delegate drifted close to Marcus, its many eyes focused on him with what might have been pity. Your species could have thrived as servants. Now you will wither in isolation. Marcus met those alien eyes with a smile that didn't reach his own. We'll see about that. The journey back to Earth took 6 weeks through the hyperlanes that humanity would soon be forbidden from using. Marcus spent the time preparing his report, encoding messages within messages, knowing that Earth's quantum computers would decode the hidden instructions. The real verdict wasn't just exile, it was an opportunity. When his ship finally dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, Marcus saw the barrier already beginning to form. It appeared as a faint shimmer in space, like heat distortion on a summer road. But he knew it was composed of exotic matter that existed partially outside normal spacetime. Nothing traveling through conventional dimensions could pass through it. Earth's response came within hours of his landing. President Chen addressed the United Nations of Earth and the colonies on Mars, Luna, and the asteroid belt. Her words were broadcast on every frequency, though they would soon reach no further than the barrier. Citizens of humanity, she began, her voice carrying the steel that had won her 3 consecutive elections. Today the galaxy has shown us its true face. They offer not partnership but chains, not cooperation but subjugation. They have built a cage around our star, believing this will break our spirit. She paused, and Marcus, watching from the crowd in New Geneva, saw the fierce determination in her eyes. They have forgotten what we are, President Chen continued. We are the species that looked at the ocean and built ships. We looked at the sky and built wings. We looked at space itself and decided it too would not limit us. If they want to lock us in, then we will use this time to forge ourselves into something they never imagined possible. The crowd erupted in defiant cheers, but Marcus noticed the real activity happening in the background. Scientists were already at work, military strategists were revising defensive plans, and engineers were designing technologies that the Galactic Council had deemed too dangerous for young species to possess. In the depths of Earth's most secret facilities, projects that had been theoretical suddenly received unlimited funding. The quantum slip drive, which could theoretically move through dimensions the barrier didn't block. The consciousness transfer protocols that could send human minds beyond physical constraints. The nanite swarms that could convert raw matter into anything humanity needed. The forge of isolation. 20 years had passed since the barrier enclosed humanity's home, and the solar system had become unrecognizable. Where once Earth stood nearly alone in its development, now every solid body from Mercury to the moons of Neptune hosted human settlements. The asteroid belt had become a vast industrial complex, processing raw materials at a rate that would have seemed impossible before the exile. Dr. Sarah Chen Nakamura, daughter of the former president, stood in her laboratory aboard the research station orbiting Jupiter. Through the reinforced windows, she could see the latest test of the quantum slip drive, humanity's answer to the prison that held them. Unlike the hyperlanes used by the Galactic Council, which moved through folded space, the quantum slip drive shifted objects through parallel dimensions where the barrier didn't exist. Initiation sequence beginning. Her assistant, David Park, announced, Probe 7 is ready for dimensional shift. Sarah watched the small unmanned probe, no larger than a basketball, begin to shimmer with the same heat distortion effect as the barrier itself. The quantum field generators surrounding it hummed with barely contained energy, pushing the boundaries of what matter could endure. Slip in 3, 2, 1. The probe vanished, not in the flash of light that characterized hyperspace jumps, but simply ceasing to exist in one place and beginning to exist in another. Sarah's instruments showed it had reappeared beyond the barrier, in the empty space that had once been humanity's gateway to the stars. Signal confirmed, David breathed, his excitement barely contained. Probe 7 is transmitting from outside the barrier. We did it, Sarah, we actually did it. But Sarah was already looking at the next phase of data. The probe's sensors were detecting something unexpected. Ships, dozens of them, holding position just beyond the barrier's edge. But these weren't Council military vessels. The energy signatures were all wrong, too primitive, too desperate. "David, look at this," she said, enhancing the sensor data on the main screen. "Those ships, they're using technology that's centuries behind Council standard." The probe's cameras focused on the nearest vessel, and Sarah gasped. The ship was a patchwork of salvaged parts, held together by ingenuity and desperation more than engineering. Painted on its hull in what the computer identified as 30 different languages was a single word that translated universally: freedom. "They're refugees," David whispered. Or slaves? Sarah was already adjusting the probe's communication array. "Let's find out." The response came quickly, too quickly, as if the beings on those ships had been waiting, hoping for any signal from beyond the barrier. The transmission was weak, distorted, but the translation matrix managed to decode it. "Please, if anyone from Earth receives this, we are the forgotten. The Council erases species who resist. They destroy worlds that refuse to serve. We have hidden here at your boundary, hoping the legends were true, hoping humanity would find a way to break free. Please, help us." Sarah and David exchanged glances. Everything they had been told about the galaxy, about the peaceful order of the Council, was crumbling with each word from those desperate voices. "How many of you are there?" Sarah transmitted back through the probe. 17 species on these ships alone, but across the galaxy, hundreds more serve in chains. The Council tells the universe we never existed, that we chose integration. But we remember freedom, we remember resistance, and we remember Earth's defiance. The implications were staggering. Sarah immediately encoded the data and sent it to Earth's military command. Within hours, decisions were being made that would change humanity's destiny. Admiral Robert Torres, hero of the Mars independence conflict, stood before the assembled chiefs of staff in the war room beneath Mount Cheyenne. The holographic display showed the positions of the refugee ships, the barrier, and the projected locations of Council monitoring stations. "Ladies and gentlemen," Torres began, his voice gravelly from years of bellowing orders, "we've been preparing for the day we could break out of this cage. But now we have a better reason than just our own freedom. There are others out there, species who need our help, who've been waiting for someone strong enough to stand against the Council." General Lisa Wong, Chief of Technological Warfare, activated her own display. "The Shadow Fleet is ready, Admiral. 500 ships equipped with quantum slip drives, all built in the hidden shipyards of the outer system. They're not pretty, but they'll fight." The Shadow Fleet had been humanity's greatest secret, constructed from resources that officially didn't exist, using technologies that the Council had forbidden humans from even researching. Each ship was a masterpiece of human engineering, ugly, brutal, and devastatingly effective. "The question," said Director Kim from Intelligence, "is whether we reveal ourselves now or continue gathering information. Those refugee ships could tell us everything about the Council's weaknesses, their slave systems, their military positions." Torres made the decision that would echo through history. "We make contact. We learn what we can, and then we remind the galaxy why humanity refused to kneel." The first official contact between humanity and the Forgotten occurred 3 weeks later. A single Shadow Fleet vessel, the UES Defiance, slipped through dimensions to materialize among the refugee ships. Captain Maria Santos, chosen for her diplomatic skills as much as her military prowess, opened communications with the assembled vessels. What she learned changed everything humans thought they knew about galactic civilization. The Corvani, who had seemed so powerful and confident at humanity's trial, were themselves slaves, their homeworld destroyed millennia ago for showing too much independence. The crystalline beings who served as the Council's administrators were addicted to energy frequencies that only the Council could provide, making them prisoners of their own biology. Even some members of species that sat on the tribunal were bound by threats, their young held hostage on prison worlds, their cultures slowly being erased. "The Council maintains power through the illusion of unity," explained Vector, an insectoid being whose species had resisted for 300 years before being officially erased from history. "They control information, education, even memory. Most of the galaxy doesn't know that alternatives exist." Captain Santos transmitted everything back to Earth, where President Marcus Cole, the same ambassador who had stood trial 20 years before, read the reports with grim satisfaction. "We're not just breaking out. he told his cabinet. We're starting a revolution. The silent revolution. The liberation of Kepler 442b would be remembered as the moment the galaxy learned that humanity had never truly been caged. The mining colony, operated by Council forces using slave labor from 3 different species, detected no warning before Shadow Fleet ships materialized in their orbit. Captain Santos, commanding the operation from the bridge of the Defiance, watched as her fleet surrounded the massive orbital processing stations. The Council overseers, a species called the Nethran who looked like massive crystalline spiders, had no time to react before human boarding parties were cutting through their hull. Remember, Santos broadcast to her troops, we're liberators, not conquerors. Free the workers, disable the overseers, and secure the communication arrays. We need this to look like an uprising, not an invasion. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted less than an hour. The Nethran overseers, used to dealing with broken, hopeless slaves, were unprepared for armed resistance. But what happened next surprised even the human forces. The moment the slaves realized they were free, they didn't celebrate or flee. Instead, they immediately began sabotaging every piece of Council technology they could reach, destroying records, corrupting databases, and transmitting messages to other slave colonies about their liberation. They had been waiting for this moment, some of them for generations. You don't understand, one of them, a reptilian sectar, explained to Santos. We always knew someone would come. The stories of Earth's defiance spread even to the deepest minds. We prepared. We remembered. We hoped. Within days, the uprising at Kepler 442b had inspired 17 other colonies to revolt. The Council, unable to comprehend how their perfectly ordered system was unraveling, sent investigation fleets to each location. They found destroyed facilities, missing slaves, and no explanation that fit their worldview. Back on Earth, the coalition of free worlds was being formalized. Representatives from the forgotten species, smuggled through the barrier using quantum slip technology, met with human leaders to establish a new kind of galactic government, one based on voluntary association rather than enforced hierarchy. The document they created, known as the Charter of Liberation, was a masterwork of interspecies cooperation. It guaranteed the autonomy of each member species while establishing mutual defense agreements and shared technological development. Unlike the Council's rigid structure, the coalition was designed to adapt, to grow, to change as its members needed. But the Council was beginning to notice patterns in the uprisings. Too many colonies rebelling simultaneously. Too many overseers reporting similar tactics. Too many slaves simply vanishing without a trace. High Adjudicator Velthera convened an emergency session of the tribunal. There is an infection spreading through our perfect order, Velthera announced to the assembled beings. These uprisings are not random. They are coordinated. Someone is helping the slaves. Zixmar of the crystalline hegemony projected calculations into the shared consciousness. The probability of simultaneous independent uprisings is effectively 0. We must consider that one of the member species has turned traitor. Impossible, buzzed the Corvani delegate, though Marcus would have detected fear in its tone if he could have heard it. All member species are bound by quantum-locked loyalty protocols or biological dependencies. None could betray the Council without immediate consequences. Then we must consider, Velthera said slowly, the impossible. The investigation that followed led the Council to a conclusion they couldn't accept. The disturbances were originating from beyond the Earth barrier. But that was impossible. The barrier was absolute, unbreachable, perfect. They sent their most advanced science vessel to investigate, equipped with sensors that could detect quantum fluctuations at the subatomic level. What they found shattered their understanding of human capabilities. The barrier was still intact, still functioning perfectly in the dimensions it was designed to block. But humanity had found others, parallel dimensions that the Council had deemed too dangerous to explore, realms where the laws of physics bent in ways that threatened the very concept of ordered civilization. They're not breaking through the barrier, the science vessel reported. They're going around it, through dimensions we abandoned as too chaotic to control. The Council's response was swift and merciless. They began installing dimensional interdiction fields around critical installations, devices that should have blocked even quantum slip drives. But humanity had anticipated this. The Shadow Fleet's second-generation ships could slip through multiple dimensions simultaneously, appearing and disappearing in patterns that no tracking system could follow. The Battle of the Void Nexus changed everything. The Nexus was the Council's primary communication hub, a massive space station that coordinated faster-than-light messages across the galaxy. It was defended by 3,000 warships and considered impregnable. Admiral Torres personally led the assault, commanding a fleet of 800 Shadow Fleet vessels and 200 ships crewed by liberated slaves who had chosen to fight. The battle plan was audacious in its simplicity. Appear inside the defensive perimeter, disable the station's communication arrays, and broadcast the truth to every corner of the galaxy. The Council fleet, for all its technological superiority, was unprepared for human military doctrine. Where they fought with mathematical precision, humans embraced chaos. Where they followed predetermined patterns, humans improvised. Where they sought to minimize damage to maintain order, humans were willing to sacrifice everything for freedom. All ships, execute Starburst Protocol, Torres commanded as his fleet materialized within the Nexus's defensive sphere. The human ships scattered in seemingly random directions, each one broadcasting different signals, creating a sensor chaos that overwhelmed the Council's targeting systems. Meanwhile, stealth teams were already inside the Nexus, having slipped through dimensions to appear directly in its corridors. The boarding team, led by Colonel Park, David Park, who had helped develop the quantum slip drive and insisted on seeing it used in action, moved through the station with practiced efficiency. They weren't trying to capture it. They were trying to reach its core communication array. Charges set, Park reported as his team finished placing quantum destabilizers around the array's power cores. But Admiral, we found something else. The Council's entire database of erased species, it's all here. Thousands of civilizations they've destroyed or enslaved, all documented. Download everything, Torres ordered. The galaxy needs to know the truth. As the Council fleet closed in, trying to trap the human ships in an ever-tightening sphere, Torres gave the order that would be remembered in 100 different languages across the galaxy. All ships, this is Admiral Torres. Today we don't just fight for humanity. We fight for every species that was told they weren't worthy. Every civilization that was erased, every being that dreams of freedom. Execute Liberation Protocol. The human ships stopped running. Instead, they turned to face the Council fleet, and in that moment they revealed humanity's true power. Not just their technology, not just their tactics, but their ability to inspire. A third of the Council fleet, ships crewed by species who had been forced into service, turned their weapons on their former masters. The Corvani delegate's ship was the first to switch sides, its captain broadcasting on all frequencies. We remember our home world. We remember freedom. We stand with Earth. The new order, the siege of Zentara Prime, the Council's capital world, began not with weapons but with words. For 3 months, liberated communication satellites broadcast the truth across the galaxy. The records from the Void Nexus, testimonies from freed slaves, evidence of destroyed civilizations. The perfect order that had maintained itself through ignorance and fear began to crumble as species learned their true history. President Marcus Cole, now in his 70s but still sharp as the day he stood trial, addressed the galaxy from the bridge of humanity's flagship, the UES Renaissance. Behind him stood representatives of 47 species, all members of the Coalition of Free Worlds. "We come not as conquerors," he said, his words translated into thousands of languages. "We come as liberators. The Council offers you order through oppression, harmony through homogenization. We offer you something different. The right to choose your own path, to speak your own truths, to dream your own dreams." Zentara Prime's defensive fleet was the largest ever assembled, 10,000 ships from across Council space. But half of them refused to fire when the Coalition fleet appeared. The uprising had spread too far, the truth had reached too many. Species that had served the Council for millennia suddenly remembered what they had lost. High Adjudicator Velthara, watching from the tribunal chamber as ships defected en masse, felt the weight of 6 million years of order collapsing around them. "How?" they asked the empty chamber. "We gave them everything. Peace, stability, purpose." The answer came from an unexpected source. The Zephyrians, the mysterious beings who had remained neutral during humanity's trial, materialized in the chamber. Their representative, a being of pure thought named Ixel, spoke for the first time in 1,000 years. "You gave them everything except choice," Ixel said. The humans understood something you never did, that a cage, no matter how golden, is still a cage. Order without freedom is not peace. It is death by another name. The final battle never came, as coalition forces surrounded Zentara Prime, as liberation movements erupted on every council world, as the truth spread faster than any force could contain it. The council simply surrendered, not in a grand ceremony or formal declaration, but in a quiet acknowledgement that their time had ended. Velthera's last official act was to dissolve the tribunal and release all species from their oaths of service. Then, like many of the council's oldest members, they simply disappeared, retreating to dimensions unknown, perhaps to contemplate how their perfect order had been undone by a species that had existed for barely a cosmic moment. The establishment of the United Systems Alliance was not without challenges. 47 species, each with their own cultures, needs, and dreams, had to learn to work together without the forced harmony of council rule. There were disputes, disagreements, even brief conflicts. But humanity's gift to the galaxy wasn't perfection. It was the freedom to be imperfect, to fail, to try again. Earth, the planet that had been caged for its defiance, became the symbolic capital of the new order. Not because humanity ruled, the Alliance was governed by rotating councils with equal representation, but because Earth represented what was possible when a species refused to accept limitations. Dr. Sarah Chen Nakamura, now director of the Alliance's Technology Exchange, stood in her new laboratory on the restored Void Nexus station. Around her, scientists from dozens of species worked together, sharing knowledge that had been hoarded by the Council for millions of years. The quantum slip drive was just the beginning, she explained to a gathering of young researchers. When species cooperate by choice rather than force, when knowledge flows freely rather than being rationed, there's no limit to what we can achieve. Already, the achievements were staggering. Medical techniques from one species that could cure diseases in another, agricultural methods that could feed worlds that had been dying. Technologies that the Council had deemed too dangerous were now being developed responsibly, with all species contributing their perspectives and safeguards. Admiral Torres, retired but still consulted on military matters, established the Alliance Defense Academy on Mars. Unlike the Council's military forces, which had maintained order through fear, the Alliance forces were peacekeepers in the truest sense, trained in diplomacy as much as combat, in building as much as destroying. The strongest weapon, he told each graduating class, is not the one that destroys your enemy, but the one that turns your enemy into an ally. Captain Santos, now an explorer rather than a warrior, led expeditions beyond the galaxy's edge, making contact with civilizations that had fled Council space millennia ago. Each contact brought new perspectives, new challenges, new opportunities for growth. But perhaps the most profound change was in how species saw themselves. The Corvani, freed from their servitude, rediscovered their ancient art forms. The Sectar rebuilt their destroyed homeworld using techniques preserved in secret for generations. Even former Council Enforcer species found new purposes, their skills redirected toward protection rather than oppression. 5 years after the fall of the Council, President Cole stood once again in a chamber of judgment, but this time he was not on trial. He was witnessing the first truly free election for the Alliance's governing council, where beings from across the galaxy would choose their representatives without coercion or manipulation. My fellow sapients, he began, using the term that had become standard for addressing all thinking beings regardless of form. We gather not because we must, but because we choose to. We unite not in submission to a greater power, but in recognition of our shared dignity. This is humanity's gift to the galaxy, not our technology, not our military might, but our belief that every being deserves the right to reach for the stars on their own terms. The election proceeded peacefully, with representatives chosen from species both ancient and young. Humanity won several seats but not a majority, exactly as they had hoped. The Alliance was never meant to be a human empire but a true partnership of equals. In the depths of space, the barrier around Earth's solar system still stood, a monument to the Council's fear and humanity's defiance. The Alliance chose not to destroy it but to transform it. Using technologies developed cooperatively, they converted the prison into a gateway, a massive dimensional hub that could connect any point in the galaxy instantaneously. Where once it had separated humanity from the stars, it now brought the stars together. As the ceremony marking the barrier's transformation concluded, an unexpected signal reached the Alliance. It came from beyond the galaxy, from dimensions barely understood, carrying a message in the ancient language of the Council's founders. We have watched. We have learned. We were wrong. The young species you called humanity has taught the universe a lesson we forgot in our age. That order without freedom is decay. That perfection without choice is stagnation. We will not return, but we acknowledge what you have built is superior to what we maintained. May your alliance prosper where our council failed. The message was signed by Velthara and the other ancient beings who had retreated when their order fell. Marcus Cole, reading the message from his retirement home on Earth, smiled. Outside his window, ships from 100 different species moved through Earth's skies, no longer invaders or overlords, but partners in the greatest experiment the galaxy had ever seen. Humanity had been banished by the galaxy, told they were too chaotic, too dangerous, too defiant to live among the stars. In response, they had not just broken free, they had freed everyone. They had forged not just a fleet or an empire, but a new way for civilizations to coexist. The galaxy had tried to teach humanity its place. Instead, humanity had taught the galaxy that no one's place was fixed, that every species had the right to rise, to fall, to choose their own destiny. And in that choice, in that freedom, lay the true strength that would carry the Alliance forward into an uncertain but unlimited future. As night fell over Earth, the lights of 1,000 different species ships painted new constellations in the sky. Each light represented a choice freely made, a partnership freely entered, a future freely chosen. The exile had ended. The empire of fear had fallen, and in its place something far more powerful had risen. An alliance built not on force but on the revolutionary idea that had defined humanity from its beginning, that all beings, regardless of their form or origin, were created equal and deserved the chance to reach for their own stars. 10 years had passed since the Alliance's formation, and the transformed barrier around Sol System hummed with constant activity. Ships from every corner of the galaxy passed through what had once been humanity's prison, now the busiest transit hub in known space. But in the depths of the Alliance's exploration command, disturbing reports were arriving from the galaxy's edge. Commander Jonas Rivera, grandson of Earth's Liberation-era president, studied the data streaming across his screens in the reconnaissance center orbiting Neptune. Ships were disappearing. Not just Alliance vessels, but entire civilizations were going dark along the galactic rim. No distress signals, no debris fields, just silence where thriving worlds had been. Pattern analysis complete. Commander, reported Lieutenant Kretak, an insectoid sectar whose species had become invaluable in data analysis. The disappearances follow a progression. Something is moving inward from beyond the galactic edge. Approximately 3 light-years per standard month. Jonas felt a chill run down his spine. At that rate, whatever was causing the disappearances would reach the Alliance's outer colonies within 2 years. Send priority alerts to all frontier worlds, and get me a direct link to Admiral Santos. Maria Santos, now in her 60s but still sharp as ever, received the report aboard her exploration vessel at the galaxy's edge. She had been investigating ancient ruins left by civilizations that predated even the Council when the news reached her. "We found something. Jonas," she transmitted back, her voice tight with concern. "These ruins, they're not just old settlements. They're defensive structures, massive ones, all facing outward toward intergalactic space. Whatever built these was preparing for something coming from the void." The revelation sent shockwaves through the Alliance. Emergency sessions convened on Earth, with representatives from all member species gathering to address this new threat. The chamber that had once hosted humanity's first free elections now buzzed with worried voices in 100 languages. President Lokmar, a Corvani who had been elected to lead the Alliance Council, called for order with a gesture of their crystalline appendages. "We face an unknown threat from beyond our galaxy. Our predecessors, even the ancient council, seem to have known about it and feared it. We must uncover what they knew." The search for answers led to the most unlikely source, the dimensional space where the council's founders had retreated. A message was sent through quantum frequencies that only beings of pure thought could perceive, a plea for knowledge that might save the galaxy they had once ruled. The response came from Velthara themselves, appearing as a projection in the Alliance chamber. The ancient being looked diminished, their form less solid than anyone remembered. You seek knowledge of the Devourers, Velthara said, their voice carrying the weight of eons. We hoped they would never return in your time. They are why the Council maintained such rigid order, why we feared chaos and change. The Devourers feed on disorder, on the quantum uncertainties that arise when civilizations grow too quickly, too chaotically. Then the Council's oppression was protection, President Lockmar asked, their voice uncertain. A misguided form of it, Velthara admitted. We believed that by maintaining perfect order, by suppressing innovation and growth, we could remain invisible to them. But we see now, watching your alliance thrive, that we were wrong. You have grown stronger through diversity, through the very chaos we feared. Perhaps you can succeed where we could only hide. The ancient being provided coordinates to a hidden repository, a vault between dimensions where the Council had stored everything they knew about the Devourers. What the Alliance found there defied comprehension. The Devourers were not a species in any conventional sense. They were entities of pure entropy, beings that existed in the spaces between realities, feeding on the energy released when order transformed into chaos. They moved between galaxies like cosmic predators, consuming civilizations that had reached a certain threshold of development. They're attracted to quantum signatures, Dr. Sarah Chen Nakamura explained to the emergency assembly. Specifically, the kind produced by advanced technology, faster than light travel, dimensional manipulation, consciousness transfer. Every advancement we've made lights us up like a beacon to them. Then we stop advancing? Suggested a representative from one of the newer member species. Return to simpler technology? That would only delay the inevitable, Sarah replied. They've already detected us. Our quantum signature is spreading through space at the speed of light. Running or hiding isn't an option. Admiral Torres, pulled from retirement to coordinate the defense, proposed something that would have been impossible under the Council's rule. We fight, but not alone. We need every species, every civilization, even those who opposed us. The galaxy unites, or the galaxy falls. The call went out across all frequencies through every dimensional pathway to every known civilization. Even former Council hardliners who had refused to join the Alliance received the message. The evidence of the Devourer threat was shared freely without conditions or demands. The response was unprecedented. Species that had isolated themselves for millennia emerged from hiding. The crystalline beings who had fled during the Council's fall returned with technologies they had developed in exile. Even the mysterious Epherians, beings of pure thought, manifested in physical form to contribute to the defense. But it was a message from an unexpected source that changed everything. The Titans, massive space-dwelling creatures that the Council had used as living ships, revealed that they had encountered the Devourers before, eons ago in another galaxy. We were young then, transmitted Gorthak, the eldest of the Titans. Our galaxy fell to them, but some of us escaped. We have carried the memory of their weakness across the void for millions of years, waiting for a civilization strong enough to use it. The weakness was elegant in its simplicity. The Devourers fed on the transition from order to chaos, but they could not process perfect harmony. Not the forced order of the Council, but true synchronization between diverse elements. If the galaxy's species could act in perfect unity while maintaining their individual natures, they could create a quantum signature that would poison the Devourers. It's like a symphony, explained Melody Waters, Earth's youngest theoretical physicist. Each instrument is different, playing different notes, but when they harmonize perfectly, they create something that's both ordered and chaotic, structured and free. The Devourers can't feed on paradoxes. The preparation took months. Every species contributed their unique abilities to create the harmony protocol. The Corvani's crystalline structures would amplify the signal. The Sectar's mathematical precision would maintain the timing. The Sylvani's energy manipulation would power the transmission. Humanity's quantum slip technology would spread it through multiple dimensions simultaneously. As the Devourers reached the galaxy's edge, their true form became visible to the Alliance's sensors. They were voids in space itself, areas where reality simply ceased to exist, surrounded by writhing tendrils of non-existence that dissolved anything they touched. Entire star systems simply vanished as they passed, not destroyed, but erased from reality itself. The first engagement was catastrophic. Traditional weapons passed through the Devourers without effect. Energy beams were absorbed and converted into more void. Even quantum weapons, humanity's most advanced technology, only seemed to feed them. "Fall back to the secondary line," Admiral Torres commanded as the outer defense fleet retreated. A third of the ships didn't make it, consumed by the advancing void. "Initiate Harmony Protocol on my mark." Across the galaxy, every civilized world, every space station, every ship began to broadcast in unison. Not a weapon or a shield, but a statement of existence itself. Billions of voices, thoughts, and quantum signatures synchronized into a single, impossible harmony. The effect on the Devourers was immediate. The advancing voids began to writhe, their smooth progression becoming erratic. Where they had moved with inevitable purpose, they now recoiled from the synchronized signature of the galaxy's united consciousness. "It's working," Sarah reported from the Renaissance's science station. "Their quantum coherence is destabilizing. They can't process unity that maintains diversity." But the Devourers adapted as ancient predators always do. They began to split, creating smaller voids that could attack from multiple directions, trying to break the harmony through division. "They're learning," President Lachamar observed. "We need something more." The answer came from humanity's oldest strength, not their technology or their defiance, but their ability to inspire others to exceed their limitations. Commander Jonas Rivera proposed something that had never been attempted: physical unity to match the quantum harmony. "We link every ship, every station, every planetary defense grid into a single network," he explained. "Not controlled by one species or government, but truly shared. Every being contributing their perspective simultaneously." It was dangerous. Such a link could destroy individual consciousness if not perfectly balanced. But as the Devourers pressed inward, consuming world after world despite the Harmony Protocol's effects, the galaxy realized they had no choice. The Unity Link was established using a combination of every species' consciousness-sharing technology. Humans provided the quantum framework, Zephyrians the thought translation protocols, Sylvani the energy distribution, and dozens of other species contributed elements that made the impossible possible. When the link activated, every conscious being in the galaxy felt it. A moment of perfect understanding, seeing through billions of eyes, thinking with billions of minds, yet somehow maintaining their individual selves. In that moment, the galaxy truly became one organism with infinite facets. The Devourers struck the Unity Link with everything they had, voids converging from every direction. But they found something they had never encountered in their eons of existence, a paradox made real. The galaxy was one and many, ordered and chaotic, united and diverse. The void entities began to consume themselves, their own nature turned against them by the impossible harmony they encountered. One by one, the Devourers collapsed into themselves, leaving behind not destruction but star stuff, raw matter and energy that would birth new worlds. As the last Devourer vanished into its own void, the Unity Link gently dissolved, each consciousness returning to its individual form but forever changed by the experience. They had touched the infinite, seen through every eye, and understood that their differences were not weaknesses, but the very source of their strength. In the aftermath, as the galaxy rebuilt and counted the cost, millions of lives lost, dozens of worlds consumed, a new understanding emerged. The Council had been wrong to suppress diversity, but they had been right about one thing. The galaxy needed to stand together against the dangers of the universe. The alliance evolved into something new, not a government but a living network of civilizations that could unite when needed, while maintaining their independence. The Unity Link technology was preserved but restricted, a weapon of last resort that had shown the galaxy what was possible when every being stood as one. Admiral Torres, in his final official report, wrote, "Humanity was banished for being too chaotic, too dangerous. But it was that very chaos, that dangerous willingness to defy order that saved us all, not because we were stronger or smarter, but because we showed the galaxy that unity doesn't require uniformity, that harmony can arise from discord, and that sometimes the greatest strength comes from embracing what makes us different." The transformed barrier around Sol System was renamed the Unity Gate, a permanent reminder of both humanity's exile and their ultimate vindication. Ships from across the galaxy passed through it daily, each one carrying the lesson that Earth had taught the stars, that true strength comes not from imposing order or embracing chaos, but from finding the harmony between them. As the galaxy looked outward once more, toward other galaxies and other challenges, they did so not as subjects of an empire or members of an alliance, but as a united diversity, billions of species, trillions of beings, infinite possibilities, all bound together by the understanding that their differences were not obstacles to overcome, but the very foundation of their survival. The exile had ended. The empire had fallen. The alliance had triumphed. And in their victory, they had discovered something greater than any of them had imagined, that in the vast darkness between the stars, the light of unity could burn bright enough to drive back any void, as long as that unity was built on freedom, diversity, and the unshakable belief that every being, no matter how different, had something valuable to contribute to the infinite symphony of existence.